All right, guys, just when we thought we couldn't get more information and action, things changing. Yesterday was busy, Tommy. Today's even busier. Couple of things that sparked me right away. Number one, we've now, what's called VBSS, Visit, Board, Search, and Seized a ship, an Iranian ship. So that's kinetic. The Marines that did that trained for it. They came probably off the MEU, and so that's exciting for me as a Marine to know that, hey, we've used that. But the other thing is, we're hearing conflicting reports on whether or not J.D. Vance is actually going to Pakistan. So I've read all day today that he was not going, and now the reporting is that he is, or that he's leading the talks, maybe not from Pakistan, we're not sure. It seems like the Trump administration is working as if these talks are working and there's a deal to be made, but all the other things happening seem to go in the other direction.
Well, I think that's how President Trump operates, right? He would love to make a deal. He says it over and over again. I would like to make a deal. I would like to talk. But also, if you do things, which he said today in his Truth Social, not nice or something to that effect, he's going to retaliate. He certainly is. And I think he's made that point over and over and over again. And the fact that you've got Democrats on air crying and whining about the way that he negotiates or the way that he puts things on Truth Social, this is how this president makes deals. And so far, they seem to work. Now, I hope that we have more talks in Pakistan. I hope we get a resolution here. But this president has made it pretty clear. This is going to hurt for Iran, and it has to. Because if it doesn't, they are never going to come to the table, and they are never going to surrender. So here we are.
Yeah, I guess Democrats will say things are escalating. Republicans might say things are going according to the Trump doctrine, really. There's a really good book that I like. It's called On Killing. It's by Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. And in there, he points out something that I love to bring on air, which is we always talk fight or flight when people get in conflicts. But the other two options for human and interspecies conflict are posture and submission. And he goes in depth about what posturing is. Like animals in the wild do it. A cobra will flare the sides of its head out. And it seems like President Trump really understands that he has to speak Iran's language in order to get Iran to submit, perhaps.
And it's not just the language, it's action as well. Yeah. Sometimes you escalate to de-escalate because if you don't escalate, you're seen as weak and the thing can drag on even longer. I'm glad to see this action, by the way, in the Strait with our guys boarding this vessel, not just because it's cool and tactically it was a huge success. I know that you're thrilled for your colleagues. I just like to see actual enforcement, where it's not just theoretically we've got a blockade, everyone was obeying up to this point. Here was finally a ship that challenged the blockade, and we said, okay, goodbye engine room, hello U.S. Marines. Let this be a warning to others. We are actually serious about enforcing this, which sends the right message to the regime. One thing that I am at least curious about, I'm not going to get too critical of it, but I'm not convinced fully that it's a good idea to send our vice president back to that theater to have negotiations that the other side might not even want to have. Because their posturing right now is, well, we're not sure because the U.S. is so irresponsible and, incoherent, right? All the words that they use there, contradictory. I'm not sure we should be giving them the prestige of our vice president to lead a delegation to show up for talks that may or may not happen. We are serious about talks to end this thing when they're actually serious about putting an end to their nuclear program, regional terrorism, et cetera. If they're not even fully serious about showing up, I wonder if it makes sense to send our top-level people there, because then it seems like we're a little thirsty for a conversation. They should be the ones almost groveling for a conversation.
Well, Nita, Guy brings into a point, kind of the big problem here is that it's not just the messaging to Iran, but the messaging to people at home, I think, is why J.D. Vance stepped in to begin with. So because the Trump administration feels like they need to show people at home they are pursuing diplomacy,
That's true.
perhaps.
That's true.
Yeah, but I think Guy is right, and maybe that's why there's been some confusion over whether he was going to make the trip or not. I mean, it seems like the latest reporting says, yes, he is, but you know what? We don't know until he shows up over there.
Exactly right.
But, according to the reporting from the Wall Street Journal, there are two groups of people here. There are these pragmatists, the more moderates, that the Trump administration seems to be talking with that maybe want to make a deal. And then there's the IRGC. And they're like, nope, 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 we don't want this. And remember, they control the military might, right? They control all the military power, the firepower. And so I guess maybe they have more cards, as the president would like to say. But how do you bring those two groups together? How do you do that?
Well, maybe you don't bring them together. Maybe you continue to divide them And maybe that's a part of the strategy. I don't know that. I'm pontificating at this point, but it
Tommy,
seems
I don't
to
mean
be.
more cards than the U.S. I mean more cards than the pragmatists.
Right.
Yeah.
No, certainly. But I think Joey knows more about this than
Yeah.
I do. But I think what President Trump is saying, and he said over and over again, is what military might. Yeah, you can be a thorn in our side, certainly. But as he's repeated over and over again, the success of this operation by the United States military is they don't have a lot left. Yes, they've got enough to cause some pain.
Yeah.
But I think what President Trump is saying is we've got the cards. And last time he referred to it as power plant and bridge day. It seems like he's back on, a similar narrative. And I don't dislike that. I like that from this president because I think that means he's serious. I know it means he's serious. And I'm not going to cry tears and clutch my pearls that he's talking to a radical Islamic dictatorship that way. Like, that doesn't bother me as an American. Maybe I'm alone here on an island, but it doesn't bother me.
Well, I'll tell you this, it's not just happening in Iran. It's sending ripples throughout the world, and to include here in the homeland. Federal authorities in Los Angeles just arrested an Iranian woman suspected of trafficking weapons for the regime. Shamim Mafi was set to board a flight to Turkey when officials took her into custody. She is accused of brokering an arms deal for Iran, including drones and bombs, allegedly being sold to Sudan. The Iranian national became a lawful permanent resident in 2016, living a lavish lifestyle while helping the regime. Tommy, I'll bring it right back to you. I would presume, and this is completely, I would presume they've known about her, what she's up to for a little while, and now is the right time to move, maybe perhaps to gather intel, I'm not sure.
Yeah, the hypocrisy, though. I mean, this is not the first. I think this might be the third, whether it's a businesswoman or family members of those in the regime. The fact that they're living, a lot of them in Southern California, living lavish lifestyles, posting on social media, scantily clad, some of them, and the fact that they thought they could get away with that and they had this entitlement and they felt like they were so protected to do so, maybe in past administrations, not so much in this one. So I think the long arm of the law found them, and they've been hiding for far too long.
Anita, you talk about the contrast of freedom. To think that we have people operating, it's not the first. I think it was Soleimani's niece and grandniece were living here, and then now this is someone actually operating on behalf of Iran living here. We're almost too free, and I say that in jest.
Yeah, well, it's a little too close to home for me because Woodland Hills, excuse me, is the next town over from where I grew up in the San Fernando Valley in Tarzana. It is a bedroom community. It is hard to imagine that this woman was operating this operation out of Woodland Hills, California, but she was, because to your point, we live in a free country, right? But they have the goods on her. They have phone records going back from between December of 2022 and June of 2025, communicating with Iran's Ministry of Intelligence and Security. And again, she's charged with brokering the sale of drones and bombs and bomb fuses and millions of military rounds of ammunition. So they got the goods on her.
Guys, just another way that the United States can kind of constrict and tighten up on Iran. I mean, I guess they were trying to make some money selling weapons to this brutal civil war in Sudan, and this is another way that the Trump administration is tightening up.
Do we want to take bets on who the first senator will be to go visit her in an act of solidarity? I'm only partially snarking on that, really. On a more serious note, though, this is a woman who was gifted lawful permanent residence in the United States. What an incredible blessing. And this is what she's doing with it. And it reminds me of a conversation we had around this table a few weeks ago where that shooter, that terrible mass shooter at ODU, the jihadist, who had been previously convicted of terrorism, was somehow back out on the streets, not deported, able to illegally buy a gun and go finish the terrorist attack that he didn't get completed last time he was arrested and jailed. That guy was given U.S. citizenship. He was a naturalized citizen. I think that we need to have a very serious conversation about stripping people of their legal status and or citizenship if they are convicted on these types of charges.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, our current law gives you a 5-year moratorium on terrorism. So as long as you don't do it in, I think it's 5 or 10 years, then you can commit terrorism.
I would say lifetime. I would say a lifetime moratorium on terrorism.
That would make a lot of sense.
Perhaps we don't hand out lawful permanent residency so willy-nilly. Maybe we do. Maybe we make it a little bit higher of a bar.
Or even temporary residency. We'll talk about that a little bit later.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.